Calvin Stone stood on the edge of his world, and his world was as vast and empty as the horizon that stretched out before him. Each day, as the sun rose over the harsh, sagebrush-covered hills, he would step out onto the porch to feel the cold morning air and the emptiness in his chest. It felt to him that this emptiness was his new, unchanging companion, as faithful as his old, battered sheriff's badge he no longer wore, and more faithful than the promises he had made to his wife, Lily, that they would build their own small empire of happiness here on the ranch. But Lily was gone. She had gone with the last gust of winter wind, leaving him alone with 2 children, Andrew and Evelyn, and with the ghosts of their unfulfilled dreams. Every corner of the house, every creak of a board on the porch, every sigh of the wind in the gaps of the fence reminded him of her, and this pain was sharper than the keenest knife. The ranch, once a symbol of their shared hope, had now become a monument to his loss. The fields he had promised to turn into blooming gardens were overgrown with weeds. The cattle he had so diligently raised were scattered, and the fences he had so carefully built were falling apart. He had lost interest in everything he once loved, and the only thing that kept him on his feet were the children. But even to them, he couldn't give what they needed. He saw in their eyes the reflection of his own sorrow, and it broke his heart. He tried to be a father to them, but felt like only a pale shadow of the man he once was. One day, as he sat on the porch, smoking his pipe and staring into nothingness, a wagon pulled up to the house. It was old Mr. Hogan, the owner of the local orphanage, whom Calvin had known since he was a boy. His face, furrowed with wrinkles, was uncharacteristically serious. Calvin raised his head, showing neither surprise nor curiosity, just expecting that yet another failure was about to come to his door. "Calvin, I need your help," Mr. Hogan said, getting out of the wagon. Calvin took a puff, releasing a cloud of smoke. "I have nothing to help you with, Hogan. I have enough problems of my own." "It's not about money, Calvin," the old man replied. His voice was quiet, but there was a hint of persistence in it. "It's about a person, a woman, to be exact." Calvin winced. He didn't want to hear about women. After Lily, he had closed his heart. "I have a girl, Sarah. She's an orphan. Her parents died when she was still very young. I took her in, but now—" He hesitated, looking around as if afraid someone might hear his words. "She's being hunted. 2 men. They say she took something that belongs to them. I don't know what they're talking about. She couldn't have stolen anything. She's too kind, too fragile. I can't protect her anymore. They've already come to the orphanage and threatened me." Calvin didn't respond. He just looked at the old man. In his eyes, there was a plea that Calvin had seen in his own when he looked at his children. "I'm begging you, Calvin. Take her in for a while. She work on the ranch. Help you with the kids. She has nowhere to go. And I can't let anything happen to her." Calvin closed his eyes, feeling his heart clench. He didn't need another problem. He didn't need another woman who could remind him of what he had lost. But he saw the old man's desperation, and he couldn't just turn away. "Take her," Calvin said, without opening his eyes. "I won't be able to pay you. She doesn't need payment, Calvin. She needs a home." And at that moment, Calvin realized he wasn't just taking an unknown woman into his home. He was taking in another soul, as lost as he was. He didn't know yet how this would change his life, but he knew that from now on, his world would be a little bigger than just his own pain. The next day, Mr. Hogan brought Sarah. She was younger than Calvin had expected, with long, light hair and large, frightened eyes. She was wearing a simple, worn dress, and in her hands, she held only a small, shabby bundle. She didn't look like a woman who could steal something or harm anyone. She looked like a scared kitten looking for its place. "Sarah, this is Calvin," Mr. Hogan introduced her. "He'll take care of you." She nodded, not raising her eyes to Calvin. He saw timidity in her movements, and pain in her eyes. It was the same thing he saw in the mirror every day. He felt an inexplicable compassion for her that surprised even himself. "Come inside," he said, his voice dry and unemotional. "The kids are in there." When they entered the house, Andrew and Evelyn ran out to them. Andrew, who was only 7, approached Sarah and looked at her with curiosity. Evelyn, who was 5, hid behind Calvin's back. She was still too small to understand what was happening, but she could feel the tension in the air. "This is Sarah," Calvin told the children. "She's going to live with us." Sarah knelt down and smiled at the children. "Hi," she said in a quiet, gentle voice. "My name is Sarah. I'm glad to meet you." Andrew, who was the bravest of them, walked up to her and took her hand. "Are you going to play with us?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Of course," she said. "I'll play with you." Calvin watched this scene, and something shifted in his heart. He couldn't understand what it was, but it was something new, something he hadn't felt since Lily died. It was a spark of hope that ignited in his dark, desolate world. He understood that it wouldn't bring Lily back, but it might help him find a new meaning in life. The next few days passed in silence and work. Sarah turned out to be hardworking and neat. She cooked, cleaned, did laundry, and it seemed that her presence in the house breathed new life into it. The house, which had once been so empty and cold, was now filled with warmth and the smell of fresh baking. The children loved her. Andrew constantly followed her, helping her with chores, and Evelyn, who used to be so withdrawn, now smiled constantly, telling her her little secrets. Calvin remained distant. He didn't talk to Sarah, didn't look her in the eye, didn't ask about her past. He was afraid that if he opened his heart, his pain would overwhelm him again with renewed force. He preferred to keep her at a distance, just like everyone else. But one evening, as he sat by the fireplace, cleaning his rifle, Sarah came up to him. "Calvin, I wanted to thank you," she said. "You saved me. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't taken me in." Calvin didn't raise his head. "I didn't do anything," he said. "Just gave you a roof over your head." "You gave me more than a roof," she replied. "You gave me hope. You gave me a family." He raised his head and looked at her. Her eyes were full of tears, but she wasn't crying. She just looked at him with such gratitude and warmth that he felt something warm spread in his chest. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him that way. I don't know what you're talking about," he said, turning away. "You lost your wife," she said. "I lost my parents. We're both broken, but we can help each other." Her words struck him to the core. He had never thought of himself as broken, but she was right. He was broken, and she was broken. They were two lonely souls who had found each other in this vast, endless emptiness. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. He just looked at the fire in the fireplace, and for the first time in a long time, he felt not only pain, but something else. Something that gave him strength. And at that moment, he realized that his story hadn't ended with Lily. It had just begun. And his new story was about him, about Sarah, and about the children. He didn't know what the future would bring them, but he knew they would fight for it together. And he was ready for that fight. The sun was rising over the stone ranch, painting the hills in fiery pink and golden tones. But for Calvin, the new day brought no light. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah had settled in his home, and her presence seemed only to intensify his inner struggle. He saw how she cared for his children with a tenderness he lacked, how her quiet laughter blended with their ringing voices, and this caused a strange mixture of gratitude and burning pain within him. Every look she gave him, full of empathy, felt like a reproach, a reminder that he had failed to protect his own happiness. He couldn't allow himself to feel something again. The pain of Lily's loss was still too fresh. He had withdrawn into himself, trying to avoid her participation, her questions, her simple, human warmth. In the morning, as he was repairing a fence, Evelyn came up to him. Her small hand touched his rough, calloused one. "Daddy, why don't you ever laugh?" she asked. And this innocent question was like a clap of thunder to him. He couldn't answer. He simply lowered his head and continued working. Evelyn understood he wasn't in the mood to talk and quietly walked away. And Calvin felt like the lowest scoundrel. He knew he was ruining their childhood, depriving them of his love, but he couldn't do anything about it. He was empty. That same day, he went to town to buy supplies. He rode along the winding road, enveloped in a cloud of dust, trying to distract himself from his thoughts, but it was impossible. Everything he saw seemed to remind him of Lily, the ranch he had so carefully planned, the fields where they once dreamed of planting wheat, and even the lonely tree under which they once sat, embracing and dreaming of the future. He rode up to the saloon and, tying his horse, went inside. He didn't want to drink, he just wanted to be alone, so no one could see his pain. He sat at a table in the farthest corner and ordered a whiskey, but didn't drink it. He just held the glass in his hands, looking at its contents as if it were his own life, empty and meaningless. "Well, look who's here," a rough voice said from behind. Calvin raised his head and saw 2 men he had seen before. They were looking for Sarah. Their faces were covered in dirt, and their eyes were filled with cruelty. One of them, tall, with long red hair, nicknamed Red, was especially unpleasant. He was dressed in a worn leather jacket and dirty pants, and his eyes seemed empty and lifeless. The second, short and stocky, with small, evil eyes, named Bug, was smirking as if he knew some dirty secret. "We're looking for a girl," Red said, approaching Calvin's table. "Her name's Sarah. They say she's at your place." Calvin didn't answer. He just looked at them, and his eyes held the cold hatred he had so long concealed. "Don't play dumb, Sheriff," Bug said. "We know she's with you. And we know she took something that belongs to us." Calvin slowly placed the glass on the table. "I'm not the sheriff," he said, "and you must have the wrong door." "No, we don't," Red said, his voice becoming even rougher. "We know she stole our savings. We want them back." "She has nothing," Calvin replied, his voice firm. "She came to me with nothing." Red laughed. "You think we'll believe you? That girl is a thief, and she has to pay for what she did." "She's not a thief," Calvin said, rising from his chair. "And if you come near my house again, I'll send you to hell myself." His words didn't scare them. They laughed, and Red, smirking, said, "Well, Calvin, if you won't give her to us, we'll come for her ourselves. And then you'll have to pay for her sins." And they left, leaving Calvin in complete turmoil. He couldn't understand what was happening. Who was this Sarah really? And what could she have stolen from these two? He felt his heart clench with fear for her and for the children. He knew these men weren't joking, and that they were ready to do anything to get what they wanted. He realized his peace was over. He had to protect her. He returned to the ranch and found Sarah at work. She was hanging laundry on the line, and her long, light hair was fluttering in the wind. She turned to him, and he saw fear in her eyes. She knew everything. She knew they were being watched. "Calvin, I have to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not a thief. I've never stolen anything. It's all a lie." "I know," he said, walking up to her. "But what do they want from you?" She lowered her head, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. "My father, he was an engineer. He was working on a new technology that could get water from the air. It could save many ranches, many towns, but it was dangerous. And he was afraid someone might steal his invention. So he wrote down all the formulas and blueprints in a coded journal and gave it to me before they killed him. He said I had to hide it and not give it to anyone. He said it was the only thing that could save people." Calvin was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. Water from the air. It was unthinkable, but he saw the pain in her eyes, and he knew she was telling the truth. "Who are these men?" he asked. "They are people from a big company. They wanted to steal my father's invention and sell it for a lot of money, but my father refused. They killed him and my mother, and now they are after me because they know that I know where the journal is. They know it's the only thing that can stop them." Calvin felt his heart pounding. He was in shock. He couldn't believe that such a fragile, defenseless girl could be at the center of such a dangerous game. And he realized that he hadn't just given her a roof over her head. He had become her protector, and he had to protect her from these cruel men. He felt a long-forgotten anger awakening within him. Anger he had suppressed for so long. Anger at injustice, at cruelty, at the fact that he couldn't protect Lily. And this anger gave him strength. "Where is the journal?" he asked. "It's with Mr. Hogan," she said. "I gave it to him when I came to the orphanage. I didn't want to have it with me. I was afraid they might find me." Calvin nodded. He knew they had to act fast. He had to get the journal and hide it where no one could find it. He had to protect Sarah and the children. And he felt that this battle wasn't just a battle for their lives, but a battle for his own soul. He had to find the strength within himself to fight for what he had lost, and for what he had found. He looked at Sarah, at her frightened, yet so pure eyes, and he realized that his life wasn't over. It was just beginning. "Sarah, we have to go to town," he said. "We have to get the journal." She nodded. "I'll go with you." "No," he said, his voice firm. "You'll stay here. I can't risk you. They could be anywhere." She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw determination. "Calvin, I can't hide anymore," she said. "I have to fight. I have to protect my father's memory, and I have to help you." He looked at her, and he understood that she was right. She was as strong as he was. She was broken, but she wasn't shattered. She was ready to fight, and he was ready to fight with her. He knew it would be dangerous, but he was willing to take the risk. He gathered rifles, ammunition, and food. He didn't know what awaited them, but he knew they had to be ready for anything. He felt his heart filling with new hope, new strength. He wasn't alone anymore. He was with Sarah, and he was ready for this battle. He was ready to fight for everything he held dear. He was ready to fight for the future he had lost, and for the future he could have. He took her hand and led her to the wagon. "We'll be okay," he told her. "We'll get through this." And he believed those words himself. He was no longer the broken man he once was. He was a fighter, and he was ready for his last battle. The journey to town was long and dangerous. Calvin, leading the horse, looked around, as if expecting the shadows behind every bush to hide a threat. Sarah, sitting on the saddle behind him, seemed fragile, but her resolve was palpable even through Calvin's back. She was no longer a frightened kitten, but had turned into a lioness ready to protect what was dear to her. He felt her warmth and her fragile strength, and it filled his heart with something new. When they arrived in town, the sun was already setting. The streets were deserted, and only the faint light of a street lamp illuminated the entrance to Mr. Hogan's orphanage. Calvin dismounted and helped Sarah down from the horse. They headed for the door, and Calvin, without knocking, walked inside. Mr. Hogan was sitting by the fireplace, reading a newspaper, and when he saw them, he jumped to his feet. "Calvin, Sarah, I thought you wouldn't come," he exclaimed, his voice filled with relief. "We need to get something," Calvin said, his voice dry and emotionless. "Sarah's father's journal." Mr. Hogan nodded, his face turning serious. "I know what you're talking about," he said. "Those men came here, but I drove them away. I knew what they were after. I couldn't give it to them. I hid it." He walked to the fireplace and pulled a small, worn leather journal from under the floor. It was old, and the cover was covered in dust, but it was clear that it had been read often. Mr. Hogan handed it to Calvin. "Your father wanted me to give this to you, Sarah," he said. "He said it was the only thing that could help you." Sarah took the journal in her hands and clutched it as if it were the most precious thing in her life. Her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed it to her chest. At that moment, Calvin understood what she had been through. She wasn't just a thief who had run away with stolen money. She was a daughter who had lost her parents, and this journal was the only thing she had left of them. He felt even more compassion for her. He saw that she was truly broken, that her pain was as strong as his own. "Thank you, Mr. Hogan," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "I'll never forget what you did for me." Calvin and Sarah hurried back to the ranch. They rode through the night, and the moonlight lit their way. Calvin felt that he was doing the right thing. He was protecting not only Sarah, but also the future. He understood that this invention could save their ranch and help many other people. "My father always said that water is life," Sarah said, her voice as quiet as a whisper. He believed that this invention could change the world, but he was too naive. He didn't understand that some people are willing to do anything to get what they want. "I know," Calvin said. "I know what that's like." They arrived at the ranch and hid the journal in a safe that Calvin had dug under the floor of his house. He knew that no one would be able to find it there. He felt his heart fill with relief, but he knew this wasn't the end. He had to be ready for them to come for the journal, and he was ready for it. The next day, he began preparing for their arrival. He took his rifle, which he hadn't used in so long, and cleaned it. He prepared ammunition and set traps around the house. He was not ready to give up. He was ready to fight. He was ready to protect his family, and he was ready to protect the memory of his wife. That same day, as they were sitting down for lunch, a wagon pulled up to the house. It was the same Red who had been hunting them. He was alone, and his eyes were filled with fury. He got out of the wagon and headed for the house. Calvin stood up, took his rifle, and went out onto the porch. "What do you want?" he asked. "You know what I want," Red replied. "The journal." "I don't have it," Calvin said. "Don't lie to me," Red said. "I know you have it. I know you hid it. And I'm ready to do anything to get it." He pulled out a revolver and aimed it at Calvin. Calvin was not afraid. He just looked at him, and his eyes held cold resolve. "I won't give it to you," he said. "Not for anything in the world." Red laughed. "Well then, Calvin, I'll take it myself." He took a step forward, but at that moment, a shot rang out from behind. Red fell, and another man emerged from behind a bush. It was Buck. He stood, aiming a revolver at Calvin, and his eyes gleamed with malice. "Did you think I wouldn't come?" he said, his voice full of hatred. "Did you think I'd leave you alone? You were wrong." He took a step forward, and Calvin knew he had to act fast. He fired, but missed. Buck fired back, and the bullet hit Calvin's shoulder. He fell, but didn't give up. He fought. He fought for his life. He fought for Sarah and the children. He knew he had to be strong. He had to be a hero, and at that moment, he heard a scream. It was Sarah. She ran out of the house, holding Calvin's rifle. She fired, and the bullet hit Boog's hand. He fell, and the rifle flew from his hands. "Don't touch him," she cried out, her voice full of fury. "I won't let you hurt him." Bug, writhing in pain, looked at her, and his eyes showed surprise. He hadn't expected her to fight back. He hadn't expected her to be so strong. And at that moment, Calvin got up. He knew he couldn't let them get away. He knew he had to end this. He walked over to Bug, and, grabbing him by the scruff of his neck, lifted him up. "Tell me, where's the other one?" he asked. Bug didn't answer. He just looked at him, and his eyes held hatred. Calvin hit him. "Tell me," he yelled. "Where's the other one?" Bug, writhing in pain, said, He left. He rode away." Calvin let go of him, and Bug fell. He didn't know whether to believe him or not, but he knew he had to be ready for him to come back. He knew this wasn't the end. Sarah came up to him. She was in tears. "Calvin, you're hurt. You're hurt." He looked at her, and he saw not only fear in her eyes, but also love. He couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't believe she was looking at him that way. He couldn't believe she loved him. She hugged him, and he felt her warm body trembling with fear. He held her close, and he understood that he had found his new purpose in life. He found it in her, and in the children, and he was ready for his last battle. He was ready to fight for everything he held dear. He was ready to fight for the love that he thought had passed him by, and he was ready for what he had found. He led her into the house. He was wounded, but he was happy. He was happy because he wasn't alone. He was with her, and he was ready for what the future would bring them. Night fell on the stone ranch, bringing with it only cold wine and silence. Calvin sat on the bed while Sarah carefully tended to his wound. He watched her focused, caring face, and for the first time in a long time, he felt not only pain but some strange, unfamiliar warmth. Her hand seemed to heal not only his wound but also his soul. He saw that she wasn't afraid of him, that she trusted him, and this stirred a feeling in him that he couldn't explain. It wasn't just compassion, it was something more, something that made him wonder who he really was, and who he could be. "You're brave," he said, his voice husky. "You could have left, but you stayed." "Why'd?" She raised her large, sad eyes to him. "Because you saved me, Calvin. You gave me a home. You gave me a family. I couldn't abandon you." "But you know they'll come for us now," he said. "You know it's dangerous." "I know," she replied. "But I'm not alone anymore. And I'm not afraid." Her words struck him. She wasn't afraid. She was ready to fight. And she was ready to fight with him. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he wasn't alone. That he had someone he could rely on. Someone who understood his pain and was ready to share it with him. She finished the bandaging, and he felt his heart fill with new hope. He knew a tough battle awaited them, but he was ready for it. He was ready to fight for their love, for their future, for their family. He was ready to fight for everything he held dear. He got up, took her hand, and led her to the window. "Look," he said. "Look how beautiful the sunrise is." She looked at him, and her eyes held surprise. He had never said such words to her. He had never shown her his soul. He had always been closed off and distant, but now he was different. He was open. He was honest. And he was ready to fight. They stood by the window, embracing, and watched the rising sun. They felt their souls merging into one. They were no longer two broken people. They were one whole. And they were ready for their final battle. The next day, Calvin woke up with a new sense of determination. He knew what he had to do. He had to go to town and find someone who could help them. He had to find a person who could unlock the secret of that journal and help them stop those cruel men. He knew it was dangerous, but he was willing to take the risk. He gathered his things, took his rifle, and, after saying goodbye to Sarah and the children, headed for town. He rode along the same road he had traveled a few days ago, but now he felt like a different man. He felt that he wasn't just riding to save himself, he was riding to save his family. When he arrived in town, he went to the local doctor he had known since childhood. The doctor was an old, wise man who knew everything about people and their secrets. Calvin entered his office, and, closing the door, told him everything that had happened. He told him about Sarah, the journal, and the cruel men who were after her. The doctor listened to him attentively, without interrupting, and when Calvin finished, He nodded. "I know what you're talking about, Calvin," he said. "I've heard of them. They are cruel, ruthless people. They will stop at nothing to get what they want." "What should we do?" Calvin asked. "I can't let them harm Sarah. I can't let them take my family from me." "I know," the doctor said, "but we have one chance. I have a friend. He's an engineer. He works on creating new technologies, and he might be able to help us. He can decipher the mystery of the journal and help us stop these men." Calvin felt a new hope flare up in his heart. He knew this was their only chance. He knew they had to act fast. He knew he had to be ready for them to come for him. He was ready for it. "Where is he?" he asked. "He lives in the mountains," the doctor replied. "He lives in seclusion, and he doesn't like visitors. But I'll give you a letter, and he will receive you. He is the only one who can help you." Calvin took the letter. He didn't know what awaited him in the mountains, but he was ready for it. He was ready for his final battle. He was ready to fight for everything he held dear. He was ready to fight for his love, for his future, for his family. He was ready for what he had found. He said goodbye to the doctor, and, getting on his horse, headed for the mountains. He rode along the winding, dangerous road, but he didn't feel fear. He felt only determination. He felt that he was doing the right thing. He felt that he was fighting for what he held dear. When he arrived in the mountains, the sun was already setting. He saw a small, secluded house that was hidden in the dense, dark woods. He dismounted, and, taking the letter, went to the door. He knocked, and the door opened. On the threshold stood an old, wise man with a long, gray beard and deep, penetrating eyes. "What do you need, stranger?" he asked, his voice as quiet as a whisper. "I came from the doctor," Calvin said, handing him the letter. "I need your help." The engineer took the letter, and, after reading it, looked at Calvin. His eyes held surprise. He hadn't expected anyone to come to him with such a request. He hadn't expected anyone to be ready to fight for what they held dear. He hadn't expected anyone to be ready to fight for what they had lost. "Come in," he said. "I'll help you. I'll help you find your way." Calvin entered the house, and, closing the door, felt that he had made the right choice. He was safe. He was in good hands. He was ready for his final battle. He was ready to fight for his love, for his future, for his family. He was ready for what he had found. The engineer, whose name was Elijah, was not what Calvin had imagined. Instead of a reclusive hermit, he turned out to be a man with a keen mind and deep wisdom. He led Calvin into his house, which looked more like a workshop filled with strange mechanisms, blueprints, and unfinished inventions. The air smelled of metal and old paper, and the fire in the fireplace cast whimsical shadows on the walls. Elijah asked no unnecessary questions. He simply held out his hand and asked for the journal. Calvin took it out and handed it to the engineer. Elijah carefully took the book, as if it were a fragile artifact. He ran his fingers over the worn cover, and an expression of deep sadness appeared on his face. "Sarah's father, he was my friend," Elijah said quietly. "He was a genius. He believed that science could change the world for the better." He opened the journal and began to leaf through the pages, full of complex formulas, blueprints, and mysterious symbols. Calvin, not understanding a word, simply watched his reaction. Elijah's face changed from concentration to surprise, and then to admiration. He seemed to see not just a set of symbols, but an entire story told by his old friend. "This is incredible," Elijah whispered, not taking his eyes off the journal. "He didn't just invent a way to get water from the air. He invented a generator that can supply a whole town with water. It's a miracle." Calvin felt a fire of hope ignite in his heart. He knew that this journal was not just a piece of paper. It was the key to salvation, the key to their future. "But why are they after her?" Calvin asked. "Why do they want it?" Elijah raised his head, and his eyes held deep sadness. "Because they are scoundrels. They are people who want to use this invention for their own purposes. They want to sell it for a lot of money, and they are ready to kill anyone who stands in their way. They know this invention can make them kings." "We have to stop them," Calvin said. "We have to protect Sarah. We have to protect not only Sarah," Elijah said. "We have to protect all the people who need water. We have to protect the future, and we have to do it now. They won't stop until they get what they want." Elijah, who had lived in seclusion for so long, suddenly felt that he couldn't stand by. His old friend, Sarah's father, had believed in him, and he had to live up to his expectations. He had to protect his legacy. He had to protect his daughter. "I'll help you," Elijah said. I'll help you solve the mystery of the journal and we'll build this generator. We'll show them that they can't take what belongs to everyone." Calvin felt his heart fill with new strength. He knew he wasn't alone. He was with Elijah, and they were ready for their final battle. They were ready to fight for their future. The next few days, they spent in Elijah's workshop, working on the generator. Calvin, who had never understood mechanisms, helped wherever he could. He carried tools, handed over parts, cleaned rust, but most importantly, he learned. He saw how Elijah worked, how he disassembled and assembled parts, and he understood that this man was a genius. He understood that this was their only chance. One day, as they were working on the generator, Elijah stopped. He looked at Calvin and said, "You know, this isn't just a generator. It's a symbol of hope, a symbol that even in the darkest of times, we can find light." Calvin nodded. He knew he was telling the truth. He knew it wasn't just a generator. It was their chance at a new life. After several days of work, they finished. The generator was ready. It was bulky, clumsy, but it worked. It gave off a faint hum, and water dripped from it. Calvin looked at it, and tears welled up in his eyes. It was a miracle. It was their salvation. "We have to go back to the ranch," Calvin said. "We have to show this to Sarah. We have to go back, but we have to be careful," Elijah said. "They know you're here. They know you're looking for help. They will be waiting for us." Calvin nodded. He knew he was telling the truth. He knew a tough battle awaited them, but he was ready for it. He was ready to fight for his love, for his future, for his family. He was ready for what he had found. They gathered their things and set off. They rode through the night, and the moonlight lit their way. Calvin felt his heart fill with new strength. He felt that he wasn't just riding to save himself. He was riding to save his family. When they arrived at the ranch, the sun was already setting. They saw a light in the house, and Calvin felt his heart fill with relief. She was safe. She was home. He walked into the house, and Sarah ran out to him. She hugged him, and he felt her warm body trembling with fear. He held her close, and he understood that he had found his new purpose in life. He found it in her, and in the children, and he was ready for his final battle. He was ready to fight for everything he held dear. He was ready to fight for the love that he thought had passed him by, and he was ready for what he had found. He led her into the workshop and showed her the generator. Sarah looked at it, and tears welled up in her eyes. She couldn't believe her eyes. It was a miracle. It was her father's legacy. It's incredible," she whispered. "You did this. You did this for me. We did this," Calvin said. "We did this together." She hugged him, and he felt their souls merge into one. They were no longer two broken people. They were one whole. And they were ready for their final battle. At dawn the next day, the stone ranch was ready for a fight. Calvin, Elijah, and Sarah worked together, preparing for the inevitable attack. Elijah, who was not only a genius, but also a veteran of many battles, showed Calvin how to use the generator as a decoy. They camouflaged it, hiding it in the barn, and placed barrels of water next to it to create the illusion of a working device. "They'll come for the journal," Elijah said. "We have to be ready for it." Calvin nodded. He knew he was telling the truth. He knew they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. He was ready for it. He was ready to fight. They waited all day. Calvin sat on the porch, holding his rifle at the ready, while Sarah and the children were inside the house, prepared for the worst. Elijah, meanwhile, sat next to him, holding the small, worn journal in his hands. "Your father was a wise man," Elijah said, his voice as quiet as a whisper. He knew that this invention could be used for good as well as for evil. Calvin nodded. He knew he was telling the truth. He knew his wife, Lily, would be proud of him. She would be proud that he had found the strength to fight for his family. As the sun began to set, they saw a cloud of dust approaching the ranch. Calvin felt his heart pound wildly. They had come. They had come for Sarah, and for the journal. He stood up, and, preparing his rifle, began to wait. When they got closer, Calvin saw that it was Buck, and there were several other men with him. They were armed and looked very threatening. They dismounted, and Buck headed for the house. "Where's the journal, Calvin?" he yelled, his voice full of hatred. "Give it to us, and we'll leave you alone." "I don't have it," Calvin said. "You can look if you want." Buck laughed. "You think I'll believe you? I know you have it. I know you hid it." He took a step forward, and at that moment, Elijah darted out from behind a bush. He held a rifle in his hands, and his eyes gleamed with fury. "You're wrong," he said. "I have the journal." Buck couldn't believe his eyes. He hadn't expected this old man to fight back. He hadn't expected this old man to be ready to fight. He aimed his revolver at him, and at that moment, Calvin fired. The bullet hit Boog's hand, and he fell. A shootout began. Boog's men started shooting at Calvin and Elijah. They shot at the house, at the barn, at everything that moved. Calvin and Elijah fired back, but there were too few of them. They knew they couldn't win. At that moment, Sarah ran out of the barn. She held Calvin's rifle in her hands, and her eyes showed determination. She fired, and the bullet hit one of Boog's men in the leg. He fell, and the others, seeing this, began to retreat. Boog, writhing in pain, looked at Calvin, and his eyes showed surprise. He hadn't expected her to fight back. He hadn't expected her to be so strong. "This isn't over, Calvin," he yelled, trying to stand up. "I'll be back, and then you'll pay for everything." He rode away, and his men followed him. Calvin, Elijah, and Sarah watched them, and there was hope in their hearts. They knew they had won. They knew they had protected what they held dear. When they returned to the house, the children ran out to them. They hugged Calvin, and he felt his heart fill with new strength. He knew he had made the right choice. He knew he had fought for his family. Elijah, meanwhile, sat by the fireplace, holding the journal in his hands. He looked at Calvin and Sarah, and his eyes held deep wisdom. "You saved them, Calvin," he said. "You saved them, and you saved yourself. You found the strength to fight for what you hold dear." Calvin nodded. He knew he was telling the truth. He knew he was no longer the broken man he once was. He was different. He was strong. He was a hero. Epilogue: a few months later, the stone ranch had turned into a true oasis. The generator, developed by Sarah's father, supplied water not only to their ranch, but also to the neighboring ones. Calvin became a local hero, and his name was on everyone's lips. He was no longer the broken man he once was. He was a strong, confident man who had found his new purpose in life. Sarah and the children became his family. They lived together as one big, happy family. Calvin and Sarah got married, and they lived long and happily. They fought for their love, for their future, for their family, and they won.